Welcome to the Make Your Mark podcast. Hey everyone, I'm Mark Moyer, author of Win Again, speaker, career coach, and business advisor. And I help athletes, executives, and entrepreneurs reach their fullest potential. What you're going to be hearing in every single episode are conversations with athletes and other sports-related influencers. And we'll be offering you the insight that you need to succeed in life, including advice that will let you jump past your competition, whether it be for a great new job or taking your business to a much, much higher level. Make sure to connect with me on social media at Mark Moyer Coach and go to my website, markmoyer.com, to get access to the tips and strategies that my coaching clients get directly. If you're looking for ways to make your mark, send me an email to mark@markmoyer.com and I'll get you going right away. Thanks for joining me today. It's going to be an awesome episode. Now, are you ready to make your mark? Let's do this. Welcome to the Make Your Mark podcast. My name is Mark Moyer and I'm broadcasting to you live from New York City, and super thrilled to have you on board, whether you're listening here in New York, somewhere else in the United States, or anywhere on our planet. Thanks for being here, and super thrilled. I just had Malcolm Lemmons on with me on the podcast, and just a genuinely nice guy, smart, ambitious, and most importantly, humble. I mean, he goes out of his way to help athletes make that transition, just like I do, and he's just does it the right way. He's been through it. He's had a basketball career, and now he's been out, and he's making an amazing impact. But before we listen to the episode, make sure you jump on to markmoyer.com, check out all my previous episodes of the podcast, and subscribe whatever you're listening to, whether it's on iTunes, Stitcher, Spotify, YouTube, anywhere. And go to the website also to get great access to content that helps your career and your business go to much higher levels. It's all there. Check it out. Send me an email anytime to mark@markmoyer.com. Would love to hear your feedback about this episode and all the others. And enough of all that stuff. Here's Malcolm. Great episode. Super nice guy. You're going to learn a tremendous amount about how to make transition and how to leverage your expertise into your next opportunity. Happy listening. Welcome to the Make Your Mark podcast. My name is Mark Moyer, and I'm super duper excited to have Malcolm Lemmons on today. I've known Malcolm for probably a year plus. You're going to find out soon enough. A genuinely nice guy, smart guy, superb coach for athletes transitioning, and somebody I've been keeping my eye on because I spy on him a lot. No, I'm kidding. But anyway, say hi, Malcolm.
How you doing, Mark? Appreciate that
fabulous. Intro. I'm glad you're here. And, we share a lot of connections. We know a lot of the same people. It's what's interesting is that the whole industry or space of helping athletes make that transition is still really small. There aren't really a lot of people doing it. There's sort of a few of us that specifically help athletes make that transition. And there's some entities that sort of try to help, I guess, right?
Right.
But before we jump into the coaching part of it, which I'm really excited to hear all your take on it, we're also going to talk about your book and a little bit about your business. But I want to hear a little bit about Malcolm first. So do me a favor and give me just sort of a minute or so about, what your childhood and upbringing was like. I know that you grew up in Washington, D.C. Tell me a little bit about that.
Like you said, born and raised in Washington, D.C. I mean, obviously basketball. Being a professional athlete, basketball was a big part of my life growing up, watching my brother play multiple sports and just following in his footsteps. So I had my eyes set on being a professional athlete since I was young, and that's what I chased. So going into high school, competed on a national level, went to probably the most prominent high school basketball program in the DC area. So I played there for all 4 years. We were nationally ranked, like I said, then went on to play in college at Niagara University for 3 years. Transferred my last year to a school out in California called Cal State San Marcos. So I finished up there and then went over to play overseas and chase that dream for about a year or so, and recently transitioned out of basketball to pursue entrepreneurship.
Wow, you wrapped up everything in that was incredible.
You said a minute or so I tried to.
Well, I meant a minute on the childhood part, not a minute on the whole life. Holy cow! Well, let's go back a little bit because it's funny. One of my guests in my previous podcast, he talked about how he played hockey at a young age. In his case, mostly to escape some stuff that was going on in his home.
Right.
And he was always practice, just to be sort of away from there. But other people do it to sort of escape just something else. I mean, they love the game, but they also are saying, well, look, if I'm playing the game, I'm not doing something else, right? What was it like when you were growing up in DC? And I mean, look, you're right. Your high school is incredible high school, but what were some of the challenges you faced as you sort of grew up and went to high school?
Absolutely. So I think the first and foremost, growing up in the inner city, being a product of a single parent home and just having my brother and my mother and I, it was very difficult on her to raise the two of us. And she put us into sports to keep us away from negative influences and just to keep us off the street. So sports kind of became that same thing for me, an escape, something to do to stay out of trouble. And as I grew older, I became passionate about it, and I saw the opportunities that it could provide for me as far as education, as far as potentially providing for my family going forward if I had the blessing of becoming a professional. And just seeing those things and looking up to other professional athletes who had those, had that, I aspired to reach that pinnacle. So that was kind of my whole focus. And of course, on any athletic journey or any journey in life, you run into those obstacles and those setbacks. But I think I was so driven by, like I said, providing for my family and reaching the pinnacle of my sport that I was going to do anything possible just to get to that level.
That's great. And, I know that you mentioned and you talk about it in your book and so forth, but you also, you witnessed some tough stuff when you were a kid, and, I know you lost some friends to violence that happens in any really inner city, and it doesn't even always need to be inner city, but when you see that happening, obviously that can be also motivation to stay away from that stuff. But what was that like?
It was terrifying, to be honest. Seeing I think I lost about 5 friends before the age of 21. So just seeing that and knowing that I don't want the same, that happened to them. I don't want that to be my life. I don't want to fall victim to something that happens to so many young African-American males across this country. And then just having my brother in my corner, I think he was a big influence on my life and really helped me kind of guide me down that path to wanting more, to wanting to do more, to aspiring to be something bigger and make an impact with my life. And I just didn't want the same as some of my friends. I saw the path that they were going down, and I knew that my mother had worked too hard to provide for my brother and I, and to put us in situations to where we can be successful. So I had to do my part to work hard and to make sure I was, on top of my grades, make sure that I wasn't doing anything that can be detrimental to my future. So it was difficult. It's always hard to stay on the straight and narrow path. But I think when you have a goal in mind and a vision to what you want your life to be, you just have to stay focused on that and do what you can to control what you can control.
Well, it's interesting you say that because, especially when you're a teenager, there's so many distractions, and your mind is not fully developed yet, and you're not really, it's more sort of, there's not as much instinct. It's more like impulse, and
right.
You have to really control those impulses, and it can be challenging. And it's a lot of stuff that I've seen as a parent, and I certainly went through that when I was a kid, so I totally get it. Now, you also went through, I think you had a little bit of an accident, automobile, or what happened there?
Yeah, so that was in middle school. Yeah, we used to go to Detroit because my family's from Detroit originally.
Yeah.
We used to go up there for Christmas, and we used to drive up there. So it's about a 9-hour drive from DC. And this was the first car my brother had got. It was a Toyota RAV4, I believe, or some kind of Toyota.
Yeah.
So we ended up taking his car because it was his first car he wanted to drive. So we were on our way up to Detroit. And as you can imagine, during Christmas, it's a lot of snow, heading up towards going through Ohio and Detroit area. We get to Ohio, and, it was about 2 a.m. We hit a black ice patch, and the car spun around a couple times, flipped over 3 times, and we landed in a ditch. And later on, I learned that if it wasn't for the steel bars that were in that car, we probably would have been crushed. So if we would have taken my mom's car and drove up there, we would have died. And having that situation in my life was really just a defining moment, because it helped me become more appreciative for so many different things, and just to be grateful for having life every day, and be able to really just understand that you're here for a reason, and to take every day as it is, and to not take anything for granted. So that was probably one of the most eye-opening experiences that I ever had. And just going through that with my family, I think it made an impact on all of us.
Well, what's interesting is that I think sort of too few people really see the lesson that you learned there, because it's, I think many people do take so much for granted. And then the second something happens to somebody and it gets taken away, they're not prepared for that. So I think that's one of the biggest lessons that we can both be trying to teach a lot of not just these athletes, but anybody we speak to, is the whole notion that, whatever they have today could be gone tomorrow, and they should really be prepared for that possibility. So that's interesting. So you've gone through high school and you get some interest from colleges. You choose Niagara because you were thinking, I really want to be sort of cold for a long time, right?
Not at all. Actually, I originally committed to Robert Morris University in Pittsburgh. And the nature of college basketball, it's just, you can hear one thing and then it'd be another thing tomorrow. So I had a coach who actually told me that he was getting interest from other schools to leave for another job. And he told me, he was like, nope, this is where I'm staying. I'm going to be at this school. So I trusted him. I trusted his word. I was committed to Robert Morris for the entire school year of my senior year. And 2 weeks before my graduation from high school, I got a call telling me that he had took a job at another school. He was a main reason why I wanted to go to Robert Morris, because I felt like I could come in there, learn under him, come in, play right away as a freshman, and that's what I wanted. So hearing that, I reopened my commitment, and Niagara University came into the picture about a week after I graduated high school. And I went up there for a visit and fell in love, and that's how I ended up there.
That's incredible. Yeah. And, I'm sure it's a beautiful area, a beautiful campus and all that sort of thing. It's funny. I've spent a lot of time in the Buffalo area and also just Syracuse and that whole, and it's funny when you go there sort of between May and June and, October, it's just gorgeous. But then people don't understand fully when they think that they live in an area that gets a lot of snow.
Yeah, they don't. You don't know cold until you've been up there.
It's insane. But anyway, so you're at Niagara for a couple of years, and then you say, wait a minute, you know what? After 3 years, either you said, I've had enough of this cold, I'm going to California, or you actually said, well, the reason I'm going to California is. So why'd you transfer?
So it's the business of college basketball once again. I remember it was the April of my junior year. I had a lot of ups and downs during my junior year. I got hurt. I had two freshmen that came in. They were playing, amazingly, and they were playing over me. So I wasn't getting that much playing time. It was just a really difficult year overall. And my heart really wasn't in basketball during that time. So I had already started thinking about, how I was still going to be able to chase this dream of becoming a professional athlete when I wasn't even playing that much my junior year. So I remember being called in of April, my junior year. We all got called into the locker room. It was right before spring break. Mm-hmm. And it was about 10 o'clock at night. So the whole team goes into the locker room and the whole coaching staff tells us that they're leaving. And we sit there. We have a 2-hour meeting. It's emotional.
At Niagara?
At Niagara.
Wow.
Whole coaching staff leaving. And so a lot of our futures were in question. A lot of players, they had amazing careers thus far at Niagara, and they just felt like they didn't know what to do because they had a relationship with the coaching staff. So I felt like, for me personally, it was time for me to move on. Like I said, my heart really wasn't at Niagara. I felt like this could be a fresh start for me to figure out how I can still pursue this dream. And I didn't want to stay at Niagara because I didn't know if the coaching staff that was coming in would give me the opportunity to play as a senior, especially when they are more focused on developing the younger players. So all in all, I think about 8 players left the team that year. So it was like we called it the Niagara Exodus.
And you all hopped on the nearest, barrel and went over the falls, right?
Not quite.
No, figuratively anyway. So anyway, you end up out in California, and then you spend your senior year there. But then what was it that, I know you sort of had how'd you end up in Europe? I mean, how'd you end up overseas, and what happened in between there?
So I would probably say that year, my senior year out in California, was the best year I ever had playing basketball. I We went 32-2. We were a small NAIA school, so it was a lower tier level basketball. But at the same time, we played against UCLA. We played against San Diego State. So we played Division I schools. And it was a team full of just Division I bounce backs. All of us were guys who had came from schools where our situations didn't work out, so we were given another opportunity. And we banded together, and we had an amazing year. I was All-American, and just that season provided me an opportunity to go play over in Japan. I had a coach that came in during the middle of the season, and he had saw me play during the practice. He said, "I like the way you play. I think I have an opportunity to play for you, opportunity for you to play over in Japan." And I just kind of waited for that opportunity to come once the season was over, once the school year was over, and I took it up in that following August.
How's your Japanese?
It's not good now. It used to be a lot better. It used to be better when I was over there, but it's one of those things you got to consistently work at it to stick, to be able to speak it fluently. So I haven't been practicing.
Well, it's funny because people always joke about how when you go to a different country and you're learning a language, like I said earlier about Europe, what I meant was like, if you go to Spain or you go to France, you sort of you kind of pick up the lingo, especially when you want to ask for a slice of pizza or beer or bathroom or whatever it is, but you're not really, I don't know how many people are going to be asking for pizza in Japan. So I guess you had to ask for, that might be.
I needed to survive. So like you talk about asking for the bathroom, like simple things, you just got to learn it. You got to know it if you're just getting, out and about around the city. You got to start to pick up on the language, especially if you're going to be there for 9 months out of the year. So.
Oh yeah, no kidding. No kidding. So you played overseas, and like, what was it, at what point did it become clear that you weren't sure how long, how long was the career going to last? And, what was let's talk about the final point where you said, you know what, I gave him a shot.
So I think every athlete grows up and they have aspirations of playing for, however many years, 5+, 10+ years. For me, I always wanted to play professionally, but I didn't want that to be the end all be all. I wanted to do my 3, 4, 5 years of being a pro and then find out what I want to do with the rest of my life. The only problem was I never knew what that was. So during my second year playing overseas, I sat there. I came in the middle of the season, actually. We had a little bit of a break, and I sat there. I was in a small loft in Chofu, Japan, right outside of Tokyo. And I'm sitting thinking to myself, well, how did I get in this position? What experiences, what obstacles led me to get to this point right now in my life? And that led me to writing. I think writing for me is something that allowed me to release my thoughts. It was very therapeutic, and I had time. So I started to write a lot. And it started to help me gain clarity on who I was, what I valued in life, what else I was passionate about, what things that I went through that would be able to help me not only in sports, but in life. Right. And that's also when I became passionate about helping other athletes, because I come across so many stories about how athletes go broke, how they struggle and they're depressed in life after sports. And I just couldn't understand for the life of me why more athletes weren't doing what I was doing to take those proper steps to figure out who they are, who their identity is outside of being an athlete. And I realized that a lot of athletes just don't know how to do it. They just don't have the guidance, or they don't know what step one is. And that's where that passion for me came from, and how I started that transition of life after sports.
Well, and honestly, I think you do know. When you say you don't know how, a lot of the athletes don't. But look, I think you do know, in the sense that many athletes, and it doesn't matter what sport, what upbringing, whatever it is, but when you go from having $22 in your wallet to having basically unlimited money, it can be really challenging to focus on something that's not going to be screwing around with that money. And it's especially when you're 21, 22, your early mid 20s, and you've got all the money in the world. And, it's tough to listen to voice of reason, because you feel like you're invincible and you are your own voice of reason. Right. So,
right.
I could say, so it led to, look, you eventually wrote Lessons from the Game.
Yes, sir.
There it is. And, what I really appreciate about this is that, you talk about your upbringing and your career and how you transformed. But what I really like about it, and what I think lacks in a whole lot of books from a lot of athletes, is that you are specific about the advice that you give, and you really lay it out in great sections. I mean, I like how you talk about, the power of your mind and, who am I? I mean, these are very important things for athletes to understand, especially as they progress forward. I mean, tell me a little bit more about that.
Yeah, so I basically wanted the book to kind of talk about my experiences, but also how I used everything I learned in sports in other areas of life. I think so much of the skills that you gain and the intangibles that athletes learn can be applied to anything else that you want to do, but it's just about figuring out how I can take this and use it in anywhere else. So talking about adversity, talking about how to deal with, how to be patient, how to manage your time, how to be organized. I wanted to take the key lessons that I got from sports and tie it into my story and put it in a book to where I can help other athletes use those traits to figure out how it can be applied to whatever else you want to do. And that's really what the book is about. It's laying out those lessons in a concise way and just giving it to athletes to help them understand themselves better.
Well, and that's great. Tell me what you mean. I know you write about the blessings of setbacks. In other words, what happens when things don't go your way. But tell me about that a little bit.
I think that's life. I think a lot of times we have this vision or this goal in our mind and we think, okay, I'm going to do this, this, and this, and it's just going to be this straight path. And a lot of times it's not, well, most of the time it's not like that. It's never like that. So you have to learn how to get over, get through, get around setbacks, get around those obstacles that are going to occur in your life and how to pivot whenever things don't go your way. So I think that is a major part of being an athlete. That's a major part of doing anything in life. So touching on, the blessing and the blessing and setbacks for me was talking about, going through that car accident or getting cut in high school or having to transfer my junior year or getting sick my sophomore year of college, like all of these things that were obstacles in the way of me becoming a professional athlete. But how did I take these experiences and use them, and change my perspective on these experiences, essentially, to still pursue that dream, that goal of mine that I had since I was a child.
Well, that's great because, it's funny when, and it's, you're writing it obviously from the athlete's perspective, but I think so many comparisons can be drawn with entrepreneurs and people that have they're doing their own thing, whether it's against sports or business or whatever. And, we all face all kinds of, whether it's setbacks or hurdles or just pushback. And you're right. It's all about the ability to pivot and the ability to understand that, lots of people give up at that point. But if you're the person that keeps on jumping over, the good news is on the other side of that hurdle. And
always,
like you said, eye on the prize. You also talk about humility, and I think that sometimes fame and fortune takes a bite out of that, or can. Can you teach humility? Is it something you're raised with? Tell me about that.
That I'm really not sure. I think for me, my mother raised my brother and I to be humble, to be modest, to understand that, our gifts, our talents, are the things that we were blessed with are to give to other people, and that we take that with grace, and we don't boast, we don't brag, we don't carry ourselves like we're bigger than others. So I think that's just something that's been ingrained in me as a child, and I think it helps you relate to people better when you don't try to think that you're bigger than someone else, or you don't try to feel like, just because you have a talent that you can treat people a certain type of way. You treat everyone with respect. You treat everyone as they're a person. You treat everyone how you would like to be treated. And that's the golden rule we learn as children. And I think I've just carried that through life, and it's helped me build a lot of relationships with people. It's just a value that I stand upon, and a principle that I, am really adamant on keeping in my life.
Well, and what's interesting is that I've met tons of athletes over the years and other, people in entertainment and so forth. And there are some that sort of let the fame get to their heads a little bit. And then there are others that are just the same kind of person. One thing I like to always say is that, you and I may look at Derek Jeter as, this guy that accomplished so much in his career, and won all these world championships, and now he owns the Marlins, or partial owner, and he's done all this stuff. but there's still 3 or 4 kids that grew up with him in Kalamazoo that are like, yeah, that's still Derek, the kid next door. He's just some kid. He's not Derek Jeter. And, I think that it seems like I haven't met Derek yet in any capacity to be able to just chat with him, but it seems like he still keeps that humility. He's one of those guys that seems that way. And, I think it's so essential because it really adds to, being humble is important, but it also, when other people see you that way, they value you more and they want to be around you more. And that's essential, especially as you leave the game. Most athletes, when they leave, and this, many of them struggle. And if you're humble, you're going to get a lot more business that comes your way than if you're the cocky guy that still talks about scoring the game-winning touchdown 12 years ago and no one really cares about. So, but I really appreciate that. So out of all the, the book, I mean, I'm sure because I can test to it from writing my book, hundreds of hours, a bunch of like scribbling stuff out, writing stuff in again, all this work. But do you have a favorite kind of advice or guidance or message that you give in the book that you think really stands out?
People do ask me this question, and I'm kind of torn because I think every lesson matters equally. At the same time, I think patience is probably something that I think would be the biggest lesson for me. I think patience is so crucial in life because nothing happens overnight. And I think, living in the world we are in today, we're so used to, at least my generation is so used to instant gratification as a whole. We want things to happen so fast. And I just don't believe like nothing happens like that. Nothing happens overnight. Sometimes things don't happen in 3 years. It took me more than 20 years of my life to become a professional athlete, something that I worked for over like day in and day out. So I think, when I talk to athletes about going through the transition phase, you have to understand that you've been doing something for 20 plus years of your life. It's not, you're not going to make the transition right away. This might take 3 years. This might take 4 or 5 years. You got to understand that it's a process and you have to remain patient through it and understand that you just got to keep continuing to put in the work and doing what you can to, get through the process. So I think patience will probably be one of the biggest lessons that I talk about.
You know what? I think I need to hire you to give me that lesson because I'm the king of impatience, man. Well, I'm in New York City. That's our problem. In fact, I saw a really funny little sort of bus station poster, and it said somebody, I don't remember who said this, but they said New York City is the only place in the world that you can get run over by a pedestrian. And I was like, oh my God, that's so true. It might be me doing the running over. I don't know. Anyway, I always like that one. Anyway, so right now, I mean, I know that you spend a lot of time. I mean, look, I mentioned to you offline, but I love your podcast. Everyone should be listening to it. I also love the messages in your book. I tend to read your articles all the time. You post a lot on LinkedIn and social media, especially, some of the advice that you give players that are not just have left the sport, but are still in their sport, what they should be doing to really be ready. And I love all that. But in your opinion, like, what's the, give me like 2 or 3 things let's say I'm playing right now. Let's say I'm playing, whether it's basketball, for whatever sport I'm playing, let's say 26, 27, it's possible that things might wind down in the next 3 or 4 years or maybe sooner, right? What are some of the things that you think I should do to be ready for that eventuality?
So I think the biggest thing is understanding who you are. It's understanding your identity outside of being an athlete. So what are your other passions? What do you value? What kind of lifestyle do you want to live once you're done playing? And really get your brand, your quote unquote brand in order. So understanding what defines you as a person, not just as an athlete. And I think tying that all together will help you start to realize that you're more than just an athlete. You have other values, other traits, other skills that are applicable to the real world, and really getting clear on that strategy, then also starting to build relationships that are going to help you make this transition. So, networking with people that are in the sports industry that might be able to help you, but also getting out and possibly taking some internships, some externships, and learning about companies, and just meeting people while you're still playing, I think is crucial because you have a platform, you have that relevance. So people are going to want to take meetings with you as an athlete. I think those will probably be the two biggest things that I would tell any athlete is to define their brand, define who you are, but also start networking, start building concrete, intentional relationships that are going to help you go forward with whatever career that you want to choose next.
That's a great answer. And, one of the things that I feel often defines people as they transition is, when they're on the field, the court, the rink, wherever they are, their confidence is way up here. They're like, at the top of their game, they're an elite athlete and so forth. But they view people in a business suit as that's a completely different planet that they can't totally understand. And then when they leave their game, the confidence plummets. So once they, if you could show them that they can regain that same level of confidence in a different environment, if they apply a lot of the skills that they learn as an athlete. I mean, there's so many things that they have that they don't realize they have. To me, the idea of being able to perform at your best nonstop all the time. I mean, you don't find that with non-athletes necessarily. The ability to be comfortable in a high pressure environment. You don't find that in non-athletes. The ability to, pivot, as you said earlier, and sort of learn on the fly. The ability to be comfortable on a stage in front of people and the media. There's so many things that athletes have that I think they often don't realize they have. But do you have a couple others that you've discovered over time that some athletes just they don't realize that they bring it to the table? They think, gee, all I can do is be like an assistant coach at so-and-so high school. I don't really have anything that I bring to the table. What are some of the things that you've pointed out?
Oh, well, I think you touched on some really good ones. I think when you talk about confidence, confidence comes from repetition and doing things over and over. So I think it's an unfamiliarity that a lot of athletes have when transitioning because they haven't done it before. But when you talk about specific traits, you have to manage your time. You've been doing that since you were a kid in high school. So understanding that it's something that you already have embedded in you. You talked about, just these little traits that we try to bring to light over and over. These transferable skills is something that we constantly touched on, being disciplined, having that structure, that schedule, organization. Like these are all things that all athletes have, but it's just showing them how you've done this in sports, but how can we apply it to other things that you want to do? And really just bringing those specific traits to light and showing them that, you've been through this before, you've experienced this, but how can we apply this elsewhere?
I'm so happy you brought up the word structure because that's another thing that I found that athletes really struggle when they leave their sport because they've had structure throughout their career. 8 a.m. this, 9 a.m. that, 10 a.m. that, whatever it is. And now that they've retired or they're sitting on their couch or looking at the TV or they're like, well, I guess I can go outside and walk the dog now. I guess I can go play golf. There's no structure. And so the soonest that they can get into a structure where even as retired players, they can do something at 8, 9, 10, 11. They know what they're doing throughout the course of their day. Their moods elevate and their performance elevates and all that sort of thing. Now,
right.
But this is all fantastic. And what I think that people can really benefit when they chat with you is that you've been through a lot of this. You've been through the ups and downs of being a professional athlete, and you've also been through the ups and downs of transitioning out of the sport, but you've really made it a success. And it seems like, every time I talk to you, you seem like a pretty happy guy. You're happy, right? You're a happy guy.
I like the guy, huh?
Yeah, of course you are. So, all right, we're jumping over to my little fun segment here. It's called Hit Your Mark. And it's basically, I'm going to throw a few questions at you. They're super easy, but they're just fun. So, regardless of the cost, and it can be $20 or $2 million, what would be your dream car to own?
Oh man, that's a great question. I would probably say a Rolls Royce. I've just always been infatuated with driving a Rolls Royce. I don't know why, but that would probably be my go-to.
Well, if you were driving it, would you be wearing the white gloves?
Nah, that's not my style. That's not my style.
Or like you've seen the guys wearing the scarves when they drive, or the goggles. No, that's fun. And it's interesting because I I often think when I was a kid, which is a lot farther back than when you were a kid, one of my favorite shows was called Get Smart. And it was about this sort of bumbling James Bondy kind of guy, but he was always screwing up. And it was a great show in the 60s and 70s. But he always drove like this little MG convertible.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, man, that's a sweet looking car. Even when I was like 8 years old, I was like, oh, that'd be so cool. And someday I'll have to find that somewhere. I don't know where. I wouldn't mind also driving a tank someday, but that's another story.
We're gonna get you one of the two. We're gonna get you that.
Yeah, sure. That'll be easy to come up with. I'll just pull it into my garage here in New York City. That'd be great. All right, now I know that you've watched between 30 and 40 minutes of basketball in your life, maybe a little less. Who is your favorite player to watch? Who's been your favorite guy to watch?
Oh, I have to go with LeBron James by default. I mean, I've been good or? I mean, I've been watching LeBron James since he was in high school. I remember the first moment I heard about LeBron James.
Oh yeah.
I mean, his talent is just it's unbelievable. Just it's a once in a generation type player, and just every time I watch him, he never ceases to amaze me. So he's
and what's interesting about LeBron is that it's not just the basketball talent, but it's the personality that went with it. If he was a guy that was really talented but super quiet or a jerk or a whatever, it would have been different, right? But he's either gotten some great advice, great parenting, great everything, and just along with being a great guy. That's a great choice. I've heard some different people here and there, but LeBron's usually the winner there. All right, so now another easy question for you. So tomorrow you're going to have dinner with 3 people. They can be alive or dead. Who would they be? Other than LeBron, you can't pick him twice. So.
That's a tough one. You said this was easy. This is a tough one. I'd probably pick President Obama, Dr. Martin Luther King, who's the last person? Maybe my grandmother. Well,
that'd be cool. That's interesting. But then again, she might hijack the conversation, right?
She would get majority of my attention, so I'd probably be talking to her more than the other two.
That's interesting. That's cool. It's funny. I get lots of different answers. In fact, I mentioned to you that I just spoken with Brandon Steiner, and he mentioned a guy that I always thought would be really interesting, but no one else has ever mentioned, and that was George Washington. And I thought it'd be really cool to go, and whether it's George Washington or anybody, but go way back in history and just sit down with some of these people that made not just the ultimate sacrifice and so forth to shape things, or even like Napoleon or I don't even know, Genghis Khan, like hang out, have a beer with that guy and see, maybe probably bad.
Ideally, you would want to have dinner with 100 people, but if you had to pick 3, that's tough.
I know, that's cheating anyway. So lastly, just to sort of tie a lot of this together, Malcolm, give me an idea of, and I don't want to use the term legacy, but more, I guess, because that's sort of like people, when they're really old, what's your legacy and that sort of thing. But what are you trying to, what do you want to leave behind with people? What kind of impact are you hoping to have on the people that you interact with?
Absolutely. I think the biggest thing for me is leaving a legacy that I made a difference in people's lives and that people enjoyed my company. People enjoyed being around me. And that I made an impact. I made someone else's life better with the time that I was here on earth and I served my purpose. So that would probably be the biggest thing that I would want to be remembered by when it's all said and done.
Well, that's awesome. Well, look, I really appreciate you being on this show. As I said, I'm a big fan of yours. I know we started talking going back. I don't even know. It's been probably a couple of year, but I do keep an eye on everything you do, and I'm really impressed, Malcolm. And I appreciate you sharing your time with me on the show today. I hope. Oh, wait a minute! I forgot the promo part of things. So aside from your book, Lessons from the Game, which is available on Amazon, on your website, etc. But what's the best way for people to reach out to you?
Well, I'm on all social media platforms. Are probably most active on LinkedIn and Instagram. So everything is Malcolm Lemmons or at Malcolm Lemmons on all social media platforms. You can also check out my website at malcolmlemmons.com. And I like to think I'm very responsive. So if you reach out, I'm gonna reach back.
Oh, that's great. Well, thanks again. I appreciate your time. Have a great rest of your day and week and month and year.
This has been great. Thank you. I appreciate you having me on.
Thanks so much for joining us today on this episode of Make Your Mark podcast. The goal of the podcast is to help you find ways to make your mark, to succeed in life, and to jump past your competition. Be sure to leave me a review on iTunes and Stitcher, and subscribe to be the first to hear new episodes. If you're looking for ways to make your mark, send me an email, mark@markmoyer.com, and I'll get back to you right away. Thanks again for listening, and we'll see you next time.